or, you know, it's one of those that you just feel confident in even if you go to all 3 games. That's definitely what you want to see. We have talked a little bit about Melvin's team. Yes, the Shedinja is no surprise, but Raghav's team as well. We'll see it in a moment. I gotta say, it looks pretty exciting to me. There's a Pokemon I've not seen in a couple years in there. And most importantly, I think, you know, we have hit that selection across the board of different restricted pairings. Just a quick rundown of the team there. It's gonna be Raghav's team over on the left side of the character selection here with Rayquaza, Tapu Koko, the Mimikyu, which I don't think we've seen in a little while, Kyogre, Metagross, and Incineroar. Over on Melvin's side, Incineroar, Xerneas, Salamence, Groudon, your favorite Scott, Shedinja, and Tapu Fini.
That should be a really interesting matchup. You know, we're probably going to see a lot of Rayquaza and Kyogre teams taking on a lot of Xerneas and Groudon teams, but it's so different with Shedinja involved with the matchup. You know, a lot of times in this matchup, you kind of just hone in and like, all right, I can't let Xerneas use Geomancy. I want to try to set up a situation where I can dunk Groudon with a water move with some help from Rayquaza's Airlock, perhaps, and I can kind of close out the game. If you focus too much on the restricted Pokemon here, it's very easy for Tapu Fini to use Soak on Shedinja to make it a Water-type Pokemon, which is a lot more difficult to hit for super effective damage. Probably just the Tapu Koko on Raghav's side is going to be able to do that. So he's going to need to be careful managing his Pokemon. Both sides really going to have an interesting chess match of trying to have the right last couple of Pokemon.
I think the way it finishes is the way that it's going to determine the game. I am very curious about the Mimikyu. It's not something I've seen much over the course of the season. It has had some play, obviously, and ever since it was really, really big a couple of years ago, it's always been in the back of players' minds. It's also a fan favorite, so why not, right? But do you think it brings anything especially different? I mean, we know it used to be used predominantly for its Trick Room. It's fantastic at setting those up. Is there anything about it that you think really sets it apart in this team?
I think one thing that's interesting about obviously the Disguise ability is great in a format involving restricted Pokemon. You know, no matter how powerful an attack is, it's still going to block 1. Also, I mean, one of the things I think was kind of tough about Mimikyu before is that it has that fast Trick Room, which isn't great because you want to be slower in Trick Room, but everything is so quick in this format, it's a little easier to take the speed advantage. Perhaps the last thing to keep in mind with Mimikyu is that, you know, in the past it used to hold that Ghost DMZ, largely a support Pokemon. It's a little bit tougher to pull off that sort of trick now, so I'll be curious to see, you know, we still see the old style Mimikyu, or if we see something new. I know a lot of players were testing Mimikyu, so I might not be the only one we see this tournament.
Yep, well, we are going to have the leads on the field. Raghav's team is going to be on the bottom side of your screen. He's led with a Tapu Koko and Kyogre, and Melvin just pulled it right out at the start of the game. Shedinja and Xerneas for him. Shedinja must be feeling pretty okay about itself right now.
Yeah, now that it's not soaked, can't be hit by that Tapu Koko, and pretty much a free turn for it here.
Yeah, the Volt Switch from Tapu Koko heading towards the protecting Xerneas, and Kyogre immediately trying to Water Spout as well. It did, of course, Primer Revert, and no damage from that one. Wonder Guard keeping itself as Shedinja starts off the game with a Toxic. You talked about it being a little bit unpopular, and he's not making himself any friends with a move like that.
Yeah, not going to get any immediate damage out here, but now it's going to be that much more difficult for Raghav to maneuver around that Kyogre. You know, don't want to stay on the field for too long, let that damage build up, and you know, also an easy way for Shedinja to knock out Pokemon without actually doing any damage. You know, Wonder Guard prevents it from taking any, but its low attack stat prevents it from really dealing any, so you kind of have to find ways to work around that.
Toxic is definitely something we don't see as much in the video game championships as maybe some other formats that people enjoy. It's very strange how the damage does tick up. But as my father used to say, if you look after the pennies, the pounds will look after themselves. And that's probably where you're going with the Toxic. Those small amounts really do add up, and it does increase every turn. Melvin is going to take this opportunity, though. The Xerneas took no damage on the first turn and immediately decided to leave the field. Maybe trying to see what this Kyogre's doing after the Toxic as well, because he switches in Groudon. Groudon's Desolate Land, activating one of the kind of key matchups, I think, in this is going to be the control of the weather. Tapu Koko tries to switch out and doesn't get there, not allowed to, essentially because Groudon's not going to take any damage. The Water Spout does no damage because of the ability, and Shedinja keeps on going.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking, you know, it's with the combination of the Volt Switch and the Water Spout the last turn, it's like, gee, there aren't a whole lot of Pokemon that could switch into that without just kind of getting totally blown up. Groudon, the perfect Pokemon for that.
If only there was something on my team that didn't take damage from both.
And there you go. Yeah, perhaps yeah, maybe not the most difficult switch in the world, where, you know, even an Ice Beam from Kyogre, and that's a pretty good turn. But now it's better yet. You know, Groudon gets in for free, threatening a bunch of damage the other way. There are 2 Pokemon that Tapu Koko can't use Volt Switch on because it has to do damage in order to switch out. So this is a rough spot here.
Well, the Rayquaza is going to try its luck this time. bringing its airlock ability, trying to help out a little bit with that problem if Kyogre returns. But Melvin immediately removing his Groudon. It came in, nullified 2 attacks, and immediately left the field. Incineroar taking its place. So we have seen all of Melvin's team now. There's going to be no surprises about what's available for him for the rest of this game. Intimidates landing. Tapu Koko probably not too fussed about that one. It is going to start changing it up, though, and Nature's Madness catches Incineroar on the way in, and that's very good damage to do to such a Pokemon. Melvin tries again with the Toxic, a little bit too cheeky there, going after the Tapu Koko, which didn't switch out, so he doesn't get to land a second Poison. That's not how that one works.
Yeah, nice play, though, kind of anticipating, well, we obviously not going to leave both these Pokemon in, but the Nature's Madness from Raghav letting him at least a little bit get some progress, but certainly hitting Incineroar rather than Groudon, I mean, not great, but it does potentially put it in KO range from an Earth Power or something while avoiding that berry. So, I don't think either side hates that turn, but that Toxic is starting to really build up. Rayquaza now in danger of being hit by it, but Fake Out, stopping it from doing any attacks and perhaps, attacking. Oh no, Sky Drop.
Tapu Koko reveals that it can hit the Shedinja with Skydrop. Rayquaza's not going to be allowed to move this turn, but that Shedinja's up in the sky. That's something that he's been saving. You think maybe a couple turns earlier, yeah, we'd show that one, but Shedinja not able to Toxic Rayquaza this turn.
And if he wants to take it now, he can. Skydrop will hit first, and then Rayquaza can finish it off at once. Nothing Shedinja can do.
Yeah, he's had to make a lot of investment to get through it there. Shedinja does not have much health. It has a sum total of 1. And it's going to be freed from the Skydrop. Its Focus Sash is going to keep it around. But I think Raghav's probably over it a little bit. We see it immediately enter the red and is knocked out. Rayquaza will lose some defenses for its troubles, but it has been an answer now to Melvin Shedinja. It's taken a lot of investment, but he's finally got there, and he can now play not worrying about his endgame board state so much.
Yeah, that was a really smooth couple of turns from Raghav there, where it kind of looked like maybe Melvin was starting to set up the board with Toxic, but it's kind of all fine now.
Yeah, I'd argue it's pretty much okay for him there. He's got control of what comes back in. He does have to bring the Xerneas in, but he can bring his Incineroar right back in. Yeah. That's going to be interesting to see how he does that one. And as you see, the Tapu Koko is taking a lot of damage from Poison now. It's reaching that point where it's just a little bit too much.
Yeah, it's kind of... there are ways in which that could work out for both players now. You see Incineroar gets to get back in, get another Intimidate out, can now fake out either of these Pokemon. Xerneas is going to get a Geomancy on the next turn, really not having to pay any health at all. So just kind of be a matter of, can this Xerneas still be knocked out without losing too many resources? If so, that Kyogre-Groudon matchup, pretty easy from the Kyogre side when you have more Pokemon remaining. But Xerneas is really scary here, where there's a really cute knockout on Shedinja, but I'll be curious to see if it was actually worth it.
I feel like Melvin's still got himself in a good position. Like, yes, he's down a Pokemon, but he's been able to control the board so well. And Raghav's kind of in this interesting point, right? He's got lower defenses from the earlier attack. Tapu Koko is, getting weakened by the poison. So I really don't see many ways to prevent that Xerneas just going to town. One of the best ways, though, has just come in as Raghav does show off his final choice of Pokemon. Rayquaza with the Swords Dance, trying to set up for that endgame as Xerneas, as you mentioned, just setting up the Geomancy. We didn't see a Fake Out this turn, though, from Incineroar, and I'll be curious to see if Melvin has called that, if he's going to be able to capitalize on this turn right away.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be some free damage either way, but yeah, if you could knock out this Metagross, or at least put enough damage on it to put it in knockout range from Dazzling Gleam, this game is probably over. Really crucial turn here. Which Pokemon did he target?
We'll see exactly where it goes. Flare Blitz is going to be Incineroar's choice. Looks like it's heading towards that Metagross. It hasn't even Mega Evolved yet either, so it's going to take even more damage. It doesn't get knocked out, so it will have an opportunity to at least try, but now the Xerneas is set up. Dazzling Gleams just could keep coming out, and Dazzling Gleams is going to be picking up knockouts. If Raghav is forced to bring in his Kyogre as one of his last two before Melvin brings in that Groudon, it could be a really rough game for him there. Ice Beams compared to a Water Spout is a lot lower of a damage output. So we'll see if Raghav can kind of wiggle his way out of this and keep that Kyogre for the end game, I think.
Yeah, this looks really rough. The Shedinja almost, I feel like, is the MVP of this game so far, where it just attracted so much attention that you kind of forget about the other things on the field. And Xerneas it looks unstoppable here. Like I feel like probably going to require some help from something strange like a critical hit happening to be able to take it down.
Yeah, well, we did see Raghav take all the move time there. Definitely thinking about it. Metagross is just going to protect this turn. Doesn't want to get knocked out. And I think keeping Pokemon numbers in particular is going to be important. Extreme Speed will not get the knockout on Incineroar, just clinging on, but it's now Xerneas' time to really show off what it can do. Rayquaza easily knocked out there with the Fairy-type attack, and not much keeping it around. But importantly, I think Raghav holding on and keeping the Pokemon count level in this turn was so important.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely over if we end up in a situation where Kyogre can't get its ability active. You're not going to beat Groudon and Xerneas from this situation. Although beating just Xerneas is still looking really tough. Wise play not to Mega Evolve Metagross there, just trying to avoid any scenario, or you can get hit by an Intimidate since it loses that immunity after it Mega Evolves. But I just don't see the out here. Just a really great trap with the Shedinja.
It really didn't look like it was doing much, but the board position that came as a result of all of that investment was so important for Melvin. Incineroar leaving the field immediately, Groudon showing itself first, but there will of course be that interesting Pokemon numbers game where if you've got the extra one to switch, you can set up the weather for what you want with a lot more ease. Desolate Land, not going to be too important right now, I think. As Metagross bullet punches, good switch there. Incineroar would have fallen, but Groudon not even phased in the slightest. Xerneas keeps on going with those dazzling gleams, and that's going to leave just one Pokemon remaining for Raghav. His Kyogre is going to switch in. It is going to get control of the weather, but I really don't think Melvin's going to let that stick around for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, there's really no reason not to just protect the Xerneas, let Incineroar come back in, switch back to Groudon, get the weather back up, and that's pretty much that. In addition, Toxic still dealing its damage here. It's a really well played game.
It's been all about board positioning. Yes, the knockouts have been coming through, but I think something to take from this is even though Raghav has, on paper, a matchup that should be a little bit better. He does have the Kyogre over the Groudon, which, as we know traditionally, Kyogre beats Groudon, that's no surprise. The way that Melvin has controlled the board, the way that Melvin has drawn attention to Pokemon, not Xerneas, anything but the Xerneas, please, has been so important. Kyogre's in, it does have control of the rain, but it's definitely going to be too little, too late. It can take the Moonblast, its special attack goes down, and it's just going to Origin Pulse. I think maybe we're going to see Raghav use these moments to think a little bit more. He does have time in the round, that's not a problem. But thinking a little bit about game 2 right now is what he's going to want to do. Maybe see if Melvin slips up, reveals something that he doesn't want to. Always important early on in these matches. That said, it's over at the end of next turn, and it's now a good time to start thinking about your adaptations. You can't ignore Shedinja. That's the problem. You can't ignore it, but you also can't attack it. So Raghav's really stuck in how to deal with that, I think.
Yeah, it's the problem with Shedinja, is you have to be able to knock it out relatively quickly usually, because it's so easy to end up in a situation where it's the end of the game and oops, I can't damage it anymore. But if you go after it too early, we see games like this. It's really well played. And speaking of revealing information, I actually feel like that's an advantage for the Shedinja side too. We did see Bullet Punch from Metagross, which not shocking, but at least for sure that that's there. I guess we saw Incineroar's item sort of did not consume a berry, so
right.
Pretty clear it's probably holding a Z Crystal, the other really common item for that Pokemon. So I guess both sides getting a little sort of trivial information, but I feel like what's really crucial going into this game 2 is information that both sides already knew. There's 3 large threats on Melvin's side of the field with Shedinja and both of the 2 legendary Pokemon, and it's tough to prioritize them in a situation where you haven't accidentally just shot yourself in the foot.
Yeah, I'm interested to see how that one is kind of going to play out. The one adaptation I'd be very interested to see from potentially Raghav is bringing the Mimikyu. Because in the same way that Melvin messed around with him by saying, you must attack this twice, Raghav has that option as well. It's a little bit harder with the Shedinja because you have to hit them through Wonder Guard, but it still provides that same kind of idea, right? Like you must break Disguise and then hit me. It also has the option to actually hit Shedinja, which makes it a little bit more valuable as we play through. I mean, being able to land a super effective hit isn't always the easiest with some teams, and with Raghav having options. Yes, he bought 2 options the previous game, but I wouldn't rule out bringing 3 at this point, considering how taxing it was the first couple of turns. There's also a lot of momentum I think Raghav could keep by not spending a turn going into Groudon.
Definitely. We see the Pokemon coming out to start the game here. Again, Shedinja coming out in turn 1. I kind of like that, where I don't know how much of a threat there really is about him not bringing Shedinja, but just kind of knowing from turn 1, it's like, hey, you've got to deal with this, don't forget, preserve your counters.
Well,
Don't commit too far.
Raghav's definitely not forgotten. Bringing some interesting choices. Curious to see how the Incineroar would do next to the Kyogre. See how those weathers may not assist in this endeavor to knock out Shedinja. But there's obviously other moves as well that, the Incineroar can learn. And I think that's maybe a piece of information about the Incineroar's moveset over on Raghav's side of the field, that it does have options to try and deal with this.
Yeah, I mean, you're just doing it as a dark type attack, so not too huge of a deal. Though certainly not threatening a huge amount of damage to the rest of that team. Another thing to keep in mind, too, is we didn't see Tapu Fini the first game, but there's still sort of the threat of Soak. Groudon coming out here, kind of the other assumed Pokemon. He's not going to not bring his restricted Pokemon, but Kyogre probably not going to be too happy to see Desolate Land activate and negate any water-type moves here.
No, the very first turn, if he's gone for something like the Water Spout, this could be a bit of a bust as a turn goes for Kyogre. But he may be able to just calm the game down a little bit, slow things with the Incineroar, just make this turn very, very neutral. And if Incineroar goes after the Xerneas, it's going to be one of those turns where nobody really gets to do anything. Kyogre does show its Protect, which is interesting, maybe a little bit scared, and Xerneas safely just Geomancying on turn 1. As somebody who's not a big fan of getting Geomancy set up against me, I'm going to be honest, turn 1 is my least favorite time for it, because now you've got that problem for pretty much the whole game. The foreseeable future, it's an issue.
Yeah, but also risky to put it up that early. Any solutions that his opponent has for Xerneas, he has the option of, has them available still. Sort of surprising to go early, but we see Crunch.
And Incineroar does reveal what it was trying to catch that Shedinja with. And a little bit of damage down on Groudon, not too important. But I think that's a bold play by Melvin to just say, look, I'm just going to set up Geomancy. If you want to fake me out, that's fine. But I feel like you're going to be distracted by what was the Shedinja, so we're just going to take our time.
Failed Protect. Kyogre going for the double, doesn't get it. Xerneas is going to come out some big damage with Dazzling Gleam here, and things are looking really bad really quickly for Raghav.
If this Groudon just keeps going, we're going to be in a really interesting position here. Yeah, that's a double knockout on turn 2 of the game. It's really not going to be easy in the slightest right now.
Yeah, you never want to say a match is over, but man, a 4-2 advantage, only a tiny bit of damage on that side of the field, and Xerneas has its Geomancy boost. Just really well played so far, and again, really seeing the power of Shedinja. This game it didn't even attack, and it's reasonably likely it never will this round, but simply existing was such a big problem that led to that free Geomancy for Xerneas, and it's just kind of taken over the match.
I just don't see a way out. I mean, yes, you've got Metagross, you can Mega Evolve, you can try, but this Groudon is now in such a good position. Yes, Metagross may be able to deal with Xerneas, and Groudon is just going to be there to deal with Metagross. It's really, a very easy triangle to follow.
And he seems to feel the same way. We see a forfeit here, and our first match of the day is done in almost record time.
Yeah, that was a very, very quick game, but you lose a Pokemon in turn 2 of game 2. There's, not many options out from that, and maybe he realized it's going to be tough to beat Shedinja. It's not going to be an easy one, and Raghav just giving the match over to Melvin immediately. Melvin and his Shedinja charging on into round 2 with a 1-0 advantage. He looks so pleased with that. The strategy worked in both games. He distracted so much attention with such a small Pokemon that he was able to find those advantages and capitalize off those immediately.
Yeah, I think it really shows the power of Shedinja, and kind of to the end games we were talking about before. You just have to have the right Pokemon left at the end of the game, where you can't really come back from a deficit if it's the wrong Pokemon remaining, right? It's sort of a chess match where, at the end, this Pokemon beats that Pokemon, and it almost doesn't even matter how much health they have, where the type matchups and the ability matchups are just so important. And I guess it wasn't really the end game we got to, but the threat of that end game that caused the games to play out the way they did, where trying to avoid getting up in a situation where Shedinja couldn't be hit just led to Shedinja's friends running rampant. Really good, really well-played match psychologically there. And I guess that's, if you want to see why these Shedinja teams are good, that's it. Even if it's not attacking, it's just such a dominant force in the field.
It sat there in game 1 for probably longer than I would expect. The Tapu Koko was there, and we knew it had an answer to it. That was the crazy thing. It had Skydrop, and he held on to that for so long. The Volt Switch failing into the Protect, the Volt Switch failing into the Groudon. Those were turns where Shedinja could have been removed from play. Even taking it up with Skydrop, not getting caught with a Toxic, I think would have swung that game a little bit more. Then we finally reach the turn where, yes, you can knock it out, where the Skydrop comes down, the Dragon Ascent comes in for a huge amount of damage, 100%, I believe. And at that point, the game was kind of done. It was really a simple case of, well, the rest of my team is ready to just run and go. Is there an answer that players can look at and say, okay, if I see Shedinja, I can leave it alone until this point? Or do they have to respect it a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of curious about that. You know, I don't know if he's just trying not to reveal Skydrop on stream, maybe, or if he was just kind of expecting Melvin to make different plays. Because, I mean, it seems like would have worked is if that second turn where he whiffs the Volt Switch Water Spout, if instead that's a Skydrop switch to Rayquaza, you get the double tap on Shedinja, while Groudon is on the field instead of Xerneas, so you're not giving up that free Geomancy quite so easily. Really easy to say in retrospect, right? Now that I've seen the moves his opponent's making, I know what he should have done. But like there were options, right, where I think there's another thing that's really tough about the Shedinja teams is that you kind of can't flowchart it really, where you've just got to make the right reads because that team always has options to just negate your attacks completely. Unfortunately for Raghav, he wasn't able to make the right ones, but I do think his team had the options.
It was definitely there, you know, with the combination of Incineroar, Skydrop on top of Coco, and the Rayquaza. It was potential to beat, but it was again in game 2, which was so short. You know, we really didn't get to see a game develop there. He went all in on just trying to beat Shedinja, and Melvin very smartly saw the Incineroar, thought, okay, you can't Flare Blitz, but the fact you've bought it, you've basically told me you have a Dark-type move on this. A lot of people do kind of quarrel about what to fill those move slots with on Incineroar, but the position it was in screamed Dark-type move.
Yeah.
And very smartly, Melvin said, absolutely not, I'm going to switch out here. And then from there, I think once he'd committed to that crunch, the problem was already going to be a big issue. He didn't go for a fake out, and that let Xerneas set up. Once that Xerneas is set up and you've not done any damage,
yeah.
I'm sorry, there's not many answers to it.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting to see Crunch also. I mean, knockoff is not great in the Ultra Series because so many Pokemon have items that can't be knocked off. So we're seeing other options, but it's more often Darkest Lariat, so you can use the Z move, or Snarl. Haven't seen a whole lot of Crunch. I'm curious if that'll be a thing that we see or not. Maybe the other thing to think about coming out of that match is that sort of the point of Ryogre is that you beat Groudon teams, but Shedinja switched flipped that matchup so hard the other way, but it always kind of felt like Melvin's side had a big advantage there. I may be a little anxious about that after that round if I'm Raghav, where it's like, oh gee, I mean, like, maybe this isn't necessarily the one I'm supposed to win, but that is the restricted pairing you're looking for, and we never saw the Tapu Fini, so like the threat of soaking the Shedinja was never even in play.
Wasn't there. I think it's interesting that you say, obviously Kyogre does beat it. You'd think with the Shedinja in play as well that you put everything but Kyogre there, and then Kyogre comes out last.
Yeah.
And says, haha, I now have control of the weather. Now I get to knock everything out. I win. But we saw it so early in both games, and I'm curious to see if that was maybe